May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be holy and acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and redeemer. Amen. While I am drawn to this graphic story of the beheading of John the Baptist and could focus on how we continue to manipulate and use one another as pawns to maintain and gain power in this life, I'd rather focus on dancing this morning. Our Old Testament lesson is full of dancing, and so a bit of a disclaimer, as I was preparing for this sermon, I listened to a lot of music, and I must confess, danced a bit, so get ready. The first thing I wanted to know are what benefits do we receive from dancing? Because I know that I feel it, but what's out there in the research that proves it? It increases our level of fitness. It gets our heart rate going. If you're dancing with others, there's a social component there where you can work on relationship building. It causes you to sweat, which cleanses you of some impurities that have built up over time. There's this feeling of joy or something that stirs up within you. And it's almost as if this powerful force has taken over you with the music that's around, and then it does something to your body and comes out in magnificent ways. I love dancing. I don't do it as much as I'd like, but I do love it and see how beneficial it is. In doing some research on these benefits of dancing, I came across two interesting facts that I didn't know. The first was that if you want to begin dancing, you need to consult a doctor if you are 40 years of age or over. I turn 40 exactly 8 weeks from now. I'm not ready to consult my doctor on these matters. The second interesting thing is that there's actually a form of dancing that's named after our dean. It's called Morris dancing. Did you know about this? Well, you're about to learn. Morris dancing is 16th century English folk dancing. And they would actually, while dancing, wave around sticks or swords or handkerchiefs when they were caught up by this force. And it became prominent at church festivals, believe it or not. And it became a great way to raise funds for the church during baptisms, weddings, and Whit Sunday. So, Stewardship Committee, take note. Some of the music that I recall growing up and even today that gets me moving, gets me dancing, the Rolling Stones, Beyonce, Bruno Mars, John Cougar Mellencamp from the 80s. Yeah. I know Christina likes Bob Seger. Our own dean has admitted to Madonna and Borderline as being a song that gets him moving. Ask him more about that later. In middle school, I went through a rap hip-hop phase, and so I was really dancing to Tupac Shakur and Missy Misdemeanor Elliott. That was good times. But this music comes on, and it seems to overwhelm me, overcome me, and somehow I get moving. Now, these days, as I'm nearing 40, my dancing is more confined to weddings, in the car, sometimes in the shower, but mostly with my son Felix who is 6, and daughter Beatrix, who's near 2. And Felix has this one song that whenever it begins to come on, his left leg begins to move uncontrollably, and he jumps right in and dances. He calls that song Sunshine in My Pocket by Justin Timberlake. It's actually called I've Got This Feelin'. So I can't bring it up without singing it to you. And I'm going to notice if any of you are dancing out there. I've got this feeling inside my bones. It goes electric wavy when I turn it on. We are in church on a Sunday morning. But I love those lyrics because I've got this feeling inside of my bones. It goes electric wavy when I turn it on. I know what it's like to be moved by the music of Bruno Mars, Tupac Shakur, Beyonce. But in today's lesson from 2 Samuel, David knows what it's like to be moved to dancing by the music of God. He is leading a grand procession of 30,000 men, which means there are many more when you include the women and the children. And they are going from Baal, Judah, which is where the Ark of the Covenant, the visible, symbolic presence of God in the community, it's been there for 20 years. They're moving it to its new spot, which will become the city of Jerusalem, the city of David. And they are marching along in procession. Lyres, harps, castanets, tambourines, even a trumpet appears. And David is dancing, and the people are following suit. David is leading this procession dressed in a linen ephod, which is a priestly garb, signaling to them, I'm not just your king, I'm your pastor. Along the way, they stop and offer sacrifices to the Lord, and when they get to the new location, a tent is built to set aside sacred space. The Ark of the Covenant is placed within in a temporary basis until the temple is built. They offer more sacrifices, they distribute the food to all, and share a great feast together. What a wonderful image. Dancing before the Lord. My body has been moved by God. I have felt it in my bones from time to time, but has it ever really left me abandoned like that, where my spirit is out and my legs are moving and I am really praising God in that fashion? I hope so, but not that often. I want what He's having. Now, I didn't just do research on the benefits of dancing, preparing for the sermon. I also did some scholarly research on this particular passage. And it turns out there are a lot of skeptics out there who interpret what this passage is actually meaning, the depth to what's happening. You see, David had just become king, and he has risen in power. And it could be that David is self-aggrandizing, walking around like a peacock, calling attention to himself, so that people will take notice as to how strong and powerful he is. It could be he's dancing for show. Or he really does have that feeling inside his bones. It could be that David is putting on the priestly garb, not just to say, I'm your pastor, but to say, I can do what Saul could not. He was your king, but I can be king and priest. Look at me. Or he noticed the reverence of the occasion and how to be around the Ark of the Covenant and how pivotal this movement was in the lives of the faithful, and wanted to dress the part. It could be that as they arrived in this new land and they offered sacrifices to the Lord, he was sharing food with those out there as a loyalty bribe. I feed you now, you remain loyal to me moving forward. Or he saw people who were exhausted from the journey, who were famished and in need. And so he wanted to make sure that they were fed. I'm just as skeptical as the next. I'm just as complicated as any human that's out there. And I'm sure that all of what I've described is taking place within David. He's seizing the moment of his power and moved to compassion for the people. He understands the significance of the occasion and is looking over his shoulder at how Saul led the people and what he might be able to do to lead better. I do it. He does it. I dare say you might as well. But what I do know is that I want to feel it in my bones. And I want to dance before the Lord with reckless abandonment. Not for show, not for attention, but because it just comes out of me. On March 11th of this year, I had the pleasure of being in Children's Chapel as the priest who leads them through Eucharist. And my son Felix did something that I will never forget. He goes up to Miss Emily and he tugs on her and he says, "Let's dance." And they were in the middle of a free-form arts and crafts centered on the lesson for the day. And Miss Emily, of course, said, "Okay, what do you want to dance to?" And he busted out into song, "Open the eyes of my heart, Lord." He was twirling around, waving his arms. I got it on video. It's one of those moments. And of course, Miss Emily looked down at him and she was trying not to laugh, but clearly amused and looking at him, and she sort of stopped moving. And Felix went and tugged on her and said, "Dance with me, dance with me." And they danced together before the Lord. I wonder how many of those 30,000 plus David was able to tug on to get them to dance. I wonder how many I may be able to influence if I dance before the Lord in that way. Join me as we feel it in our bones and we dance together. Amen.